Hi everyone, today I'm taking a look at a brand new Canon lens that's guaranteed to sell in millions. The new 50mm f1.8 STM, compatible with full frame and APS-C cameras and costing just over £100 right now, or $125 US. This is Canon's third low-budget 50mm lens in its EF range. Its immediate predecessor, the 50mm f1.8 Mark II, is world famous for being one of the best value for money and highest selling camera lenses of all time. A 50mm lens with an aperture as fast as f1.8 enables you to get some nicely out of focus backgrounds in your pictures, ideal for getting more creative in your photography, or for getting portrait photos. As an example, here's a picture taken at f5.6, the same aperture as a typical kit lens, and here's the same picture at f1.8. An aperture of f1.8 also lets in a lot more light than any kit lens you can buy, which is handy if you're shooting indoors or in the dark. Now, this new STM version of the lens has the same optics as the Mark II version by Canon's own admission, and my tests bore that out. However, it has quite a number of improvements and aces up its sleeve, which make me very happy. Firstly, let's look at its build quality. This new lens has a metal lens mount, which makes it feel a little more solid and substantial than a plasticky old Mark II version. However, it's also very slightly shorter, looking a bit more compact and modern. The first thing my fiancée did when she saw this on my camera was to ask if I was testing a new pancake lens, which isn't so far from the truth, I suppose. The lens's new focus ring is a major improvement over the previous lens. It's electronically coupled to the autofocus motor. As a result, it turns extremely smoothly and it's very well damped, but it only works when your camera is turned on. It's safe to turn the focus ring at any time, unlike on the previous model. You can manually focus when you switch the lens to manual focus. But if the lens is set to autofocus, then turning the focus ring will do nothing at all, unless you're half pressing the shutter button at the same time. Overall, the focus ring is very responsive. And the headline feature of this lens is its new STM autofocus motor. STM lenses are more efficient at focusing in live view or video mode, especially if you're using one of Canon's newer cameras. They're also meant to be much quieter in operation. We'll be the judge of that. Unfortunately, this STM focus motor is not silent. It makes a quiet buzzing sound. It's a heck of a lot quieter than the older lens, but still, it's easy to hear the motor working while you're doing video work if you're recording sound with the internal microphone, as you can see here. It's also not quite as fast as the previous lens. However, I much prefer this lens's modern autofocus system. Another nice little improvement is that this lens has 7 rounded aperture blades now, as opposed to just 5 in the previous lens. Let's see how that looks when the lens's apertures are stopped down. As you can see, the new lens gives you lovely circular highlights instead of the old lens's crazy pentagons. Something else of interest to video makers is that, when you're shooting in video mode, this new lens's iris blades smoothly zoom into place when you change the aperture, instead of jerking wider or narrower. Compare that with the old lens, which jerks open and closed. I've never mentioned it before, but this seems to be a feature found on all of Canon's newer STM lenses. It's a subtle but nice little improvement. Overall, this lens's build quality is a great step up from its predecessor, especially for video makers, although do bear in mind that, unfortunately, it still doesn't have image stabilization. That would be amazing. Okay, let's look at image quality. Canon have reused the Mark II lens's old optics here, so it's exactly the same story as the previous lens. On a full-frame camera, the lens is very sharp in the middle at f1.8 with average contrast levels. The corners of the image are quite dark, with low contrast and some noticeable softness and ghosting, but no chromatic aberration. Stop down to f2.8 and the corners are much brighter and sharper. At f4 the corners are even better, and at f5.6 the lens is razor sharp from corner to corner. So a very typical 50mm lens performance here for a full frame camera. There are better 50mm lenses out there now, but certainly not for the same price as this Canon lens. Let's see how the lens performs on an APS-C camera now, which are much more common. Again, it's exactly the same performance as the famous Mark II version of the lens. At f1.8 there's a reasonable level of sharpness, but we also see some quite low contrast levels and some ghosting and purple fringing. The corners of the image are just a bit worse, showing very heavy ghosting. Stop down to f2.8 for a major improvement in the corners and excellent sharpness back in the middle. Stop down again to f4 and the lens is razor sharp in the center and the corners now look fantastic. Again, it's a typical 50mm performance on an APS-C camera. You can definitely get sharper 50mm lenses than this, but again, not for the price you're paying. Well, let's take a look at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. People with APS-C cameras needn't worry about this, really. On full frame, it's the same performance as the Mark II lens. Just a little barrel distortion, but very heavy vignetting at f1.8. Stop down to f2.8 to chase that vignetting into the corners, and at f4 we see even illumination. You'll definitely want to use the peripheral illumination option on your camera, although you'll have to update your camera with a new lens profile when Canon finally release it. Now let's look at close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to 35 centimeters. That's 10 centimeters closer than the Mark II model, a major improvement. At f1.8, the close-up image quality is a touch soft. At f2.8, we do see a lot more sharpness though, and at f4, the close-up image quality is fantastic. If you can find a cheap extension tube, like this 36mm one, or even a more expensive extension tube, then you'll be able to focus incredibly closely to your subject. f1.8 will be pretty soft, and f2.8 is decently sharp. Click on the link below for more info about extension tubes. As you can see, this combination can really open up the fun world of macro photography for you. This new version of the lens has another improvement. It has Canon's super spectra coatings in order to reduce flaring caused by bright lights. As you can see, while the new lens still shows some flaring, it's a massive step up from the disastrous Mark II version. Unfortunately though, there's been no improvement in the quality of this lens's bokeh. Out of focus areas still look a bit busy and edgy. I've never been a fan of the bokeh on Canon's 50mm lenses. Overall, it's hard not to be pleased with Canon's new 50mm lens. It certainly represents fantastic value for money. Compared to the Mark II lens, it has better build quality and much quieter autofocus, although the older lens admittedly focuses faster. The new lens also has more aperture blades, which gives much nicer out-of-focus backgrounds at narrower apertures. The optics of both lenses are the same, averagely good, and very nice when the aperture is topped down. But the new lens has better coatings for dealing with flaring. It also focuses much closer, which makes the lens more versatile. A few people will be disappointed by its lack of image stabilization, but if it had been included, then the lens would have cost a lot more. At the end of the day, the lens is incredible value for money, lots of fun, and a much more modern piece of equipment than the old Mark II version. It's highly recommended for anyone looking to greatly improve their photography on a budget.